The Earth has decided it's done with warm weather and plunged straight into a new ice age. Global temperatures are nosediving with no signs of stopping. Even the news anchor looks like he's auditioning for the next Frozen movie, trying to keep it together while shivering on live TV. He urges everyone not to lose hope, promising that the government hasn't forgotten them. Sure, just like that time they said it'd only take 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Just then, there's a knock at Han Feng's door. A familiar voice calls out his name. When he opens it, he finds Hyona standing there, shaking like a leaf in a snowstorm. Before Han Feng's can ask what in the ice age she's doing out in the cold, she jumps at him and kisses him like they're in some cheesy rom-com. Han Feng's pulls back, his brain doing gymnastics trying to figure out what's going on. Hyona, channeling all the drama of a K-drama lead, declares that she's realized he's the only one she truly loves. To prove it, she grabs his hand and presses it to her chest, daring him to feel her heartbeat. Han Feng's, now blushing like a teenager caught with a love letter, tries to tell her how much her words mean to him. But before he can finish, she shushes him and tells him to just close his eyes. And like a guy who's watched too many romance movies, he does. Bam! The door crashes open, and Han Feng's is suddenly on the floor, bleeding out. Talk about a date going south. As Han Feng's lies there, fading fast, Hyona casually asks the intruder if he's finished the job. The guy, who clearly skipped the empathy lessons, says she knew this was coming. The world's gone to hell, so what's one less guy in the mix? He starts rummaging through Han Feng's stuff, looking for anything useful. Meanwhile, Han Feng's, who's quickly realizing he should have stayed in bed, curses Hyona for her betrayal. Just as he's about to punch his ticket to the afterlife, he spots a distant golden light. Reaching out, he hopes it's the way to heaven, but the light gets brighter, almost blinding him. Suddenly, Han Feng's wakes up in his own bed, gasping for air. After what feels like 30 minutes of soaking up the sun like a cat, he checks the date. It's June 28th, a couple of weeks before the apocalypse that was supposed to end him. Somehow, he's been given a do-over, a second chance to avoid being backstabbed. But this time, things are different. For starters, his hand is glowing red like a malfunctioning Christmas light, and it's not going away. Just when he starts to wonder if he's losing it, he sneezes and whoa! The red glow changes to green and starts expanding like it's got a mind of its own. Han Feng's panics as light beams shoot from his hands. He decides that science probably can't explain this one, unless it's got a really good sense of humor. Exhausted, he flops onto the sofa, wondering what in the world is going on with his hands. It's like he's living in one of those Manhwa stories where the main character wakes up with crazy powers. Curious and a little freaked out, Han Feng's grabs a butcher knife, hoping for some kind of reaction. Nothing. His stomach growls, reminding him that apocalypse or not, he's still gotta eat. He checks the fridge, empty of course, but there's a jar of roasted soybeans left over from before everything went to hell. As he picks up a soybean with his glowing hand and pops it into his mouth, a strange blast occurs, and suddenly there's a bean sprouted in his mouth. Yep, he just turned dinner into a garden. Instead of just filling his stomach, it fills him with energy, and the green light disappears. Han Feng's decides he's got to figure out what's going on with these weird powers. But first things first, he needs supplies before the end of the world. Walking through the busy market, surrounded by people who have no idea what's coming, he thinks about the wild events of the past day. Red glow, green glow, sprouting soybeans. It's like he stumbled into the strangest cooking show ever. Just as he's trying to make sense of it all, he hears someone call his name. He turns around and sees Hyona, smiling like they just bumped into each other by accident. She asks if he's out shopping too, and Han Feng's wonders if this meeting is really a coincidence, or if things are about to get even weirder. Hyona, the goddess of Han Feng's dreams for years, well, more like nightmares now, has always been the center of his universe. Our boy did everything to make her happy, even though deep down, he knew he was just her backup plan. But hey, he never thought she'd go so far as to get him killed. That's a bit extreme, even for a fallback guy. Han Feng's tries to calm his racing heart, reminding himself that it's not time for revenge just yet. He's got more pressing matters, like stocking up on supplies for the upcoming apocalypse. Just as he's lost in thought, Hyona snaps him out of it, asking why he's spacing out and mentioning she's been calling his name for a while. He slaps on a smile, hiding the storm inside, and apologizes, saying she looks especially beautiful today, which made him lose track of time. She laughs, telling him to stop being so smooth and asks since when he got this slick. She then suggests they do some shopping together now that they've run into each other. But Chad, Han Feng's isn't the same guy she used to manipulate. He politely declines, walks off, and says he can't today, leaving her standing there, probably wondering if she's in the wrong reality show. As he walks away, he thinks, nice try, but this guy isn't your personal ATM anymore. Han Feng's heads to the WDMA Supercenter in Waldemar Shopping Plaza, the biggest and most well-stocked supermarket in the East region. This place is a fortress of groceries and survival gear. He recalls how it got cleaned out overnight when the Ice Age hit in the future, and no one ever figured out who did it. As he pushes a cart through the aisles, he knows he needs to stock up as much as possible before the apocalypse strikes. He glances at the apocalypse survival guide on his phone. His shopping list is longer than a fantasy novel. Food, winter clothes, medicine, daily necessities, fuel, you name it, he needs it. But then he checks his balance and realizes he's more broke than he thought. Just as he's about to panic, a notification pops up on his phone. His credit card evaluation has been approved, making him eligible for a loan up to 168,800 yuan. That's like finding a treasure chest in the middle of a desert. A sly grin spreads across his face as he starts planning. Why pay back loans when the world's about to end? He thinks, feeling like a genius. Meanwhile, Hyona is still fuming, kicking a can down the road while cursing him under her breath. She's thinking, how dare he refuse me? Pathetic loser doesn't even own a car. She's done being nice to him. Just then, she hears car horns and turns to see Han Feng stepping out of a fancy car. Her eyes widen with curiosity, and she asks if it's his car. He replies coolly, yeah, just got it. My dad's been doing well in the US, wired me some cash. I just dropped him off at the airport. Instantly, her demeanor changes. The crocodile tears start flowing as she apologizes for asking him to go shopping without knowing he was busy with his dad. She explains she thought he was ditching her because he seemed distant earlier. Han Feng's pulls her close, smirking, and says, you're a silly girl. Why would I ever ditch you? You're way too important to me. She eats it up, suggesting they have dinner and watch a movie today. She wants to get to know him better. Or so she says, but he's too busy unloading his car to pay her much mind. Hyona, curious, asks why he bought so much stuff. Han Feng's brushes it off, saying it's nothing special, just some things he likes. He even adds that he got her a present. She assumes it's a birthday gift and leaves, smiling back at him, thinking she's still got him wrapped around her finger. But as she walks away, Han Feng's watches her with a grin, thinking, she should look forward to it, alright? He can't let her find out about his stockpile, though. That's his golden ticket to surviving the apocalypse. And once the world ends, she'll get what's coming to her, especially after what she did to him. He's actually starting to look forward to the apocalypse, if only to see her face when it all goes down. Fast forward to Thursday, June 29th. Han Feng's knows July 15th is the day the snowstorm will hit. Heavy snow, temperatures dropping to -20 degrees Celsius. Over the next month, it'll get even worse, with temperatures plummeting to -70 degrees Celsius, turning the world into a giant freezer. He's got to stock up on enough food, but in a way that won't tip off his nosy neighbors. Sensitive supplies must be moved at night, like a ninja in the shadows. One by one, his preparations are ticking off the list. By July 14th, his house is a fortress ready for the big freeze. But there's still one thing left to figure out. What's up with these weird new powers he's been noticing? That's next on his to-do list. The apocalypse can wait. He's got some superpowers to master first. Our boy Han Feng's was facing the impending Ice Age apocalypse with all the determination of a guy who just realized his freezer was full of nothing but ice cream and frozen veggies. Sitting at the table, he stared down at a plate of freshly cooked soybeans, which he had somehow grown using his new and utterly unpredictable plant powers. It was a strange feeling, kind of like discovering you can suddenly juggle but only with one hand, and only on Tuesdays. Han took a deep breath. All right, taste test time, he muttered, trying to sound more confident than he felt. He popped a soybean into his mouth, chewing slowly. It wasn't half bad, and considering the world was turning into a giant icebox, having a renewable food source felt like winning the lottery, if the prize was beans. This little victory told him one thing: his power could actually be useful. But he needed to figure out how to control it, and that was going to take more than just wishing on a star. Standing in front of the fridge, he realized he couldn't live on soybeans alone. Sure, they were nutritious, but even in an apocalypse, variety was the spice of life. Time to branch out, our hero decided, glancing around his kitchen like it held the secrets of the universe. Hours later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Han woke up feeling like he'd been hit by a truck. His head pounded, his body felt like jelly, and to top it off, his kitchen looked like a tornado had passed through. It didn't take a genius to figure out that his plant powers came with a hefty price, like a bad hangover, but instead of cheap booze, it was from overdoing the supernatural gardening. Sitting at the dining table again, he munched on his trusty soybeans, replaying the chaos in his mind. Before blacking out, he had tried growing various plants. Some didn't do a thing, some sprouted like magic, and others, well, they exploded into something that looked suspiciously like charcoal briquettes. It was like playing the world's most dangerous game of gardening roulette. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't replicate his earlier success. Come on, Han, focus, he told himself, trying to regulate his breathing like some kind of plant-wielding Zen master. But instead of enlightenment, all he got was another blackout. When he came to, frustrated and holding a piece of broccoli, Han tried to make sense of his powers. Maybe the trick was all in his head? He folded his legs, imagining himself as one with nature. Suddenly, a green light appeared in his hand, and Han's eyes lit up. All right, we're getting somewhere, he thought, trying to channel the power into a piece of meat. But the meat just sat there, unimpressed. He figured maybe his powers were vegetarian. But then, he remembered the red light from earlier and decided to give it a shot. Closing his eyes, he focused on the red light, which flared up in his hand and transferred to the meat. The meat started to burn, and he tossed it aside like it was a hot coal. At first, Han thought the red light was just for cooking, but then it hit him, it wasn't just cooking. It was breaking things down like some kind of reverse growth. His mind raced as he wondered if the green light was for building things up while the red light broke them down. Feeling like a mad scientist, he combined the two lights and bam! The meat puffed up in a mild explosion. Han stared in shock as the soybeans he was holding vanished, seemingly absorbed into the meat. Examining it, he found it looked, felt, and even smelled like real meat, but there was something oddly fresh about it. Despite the string of failures, Han decided to shelve this mystery for later. Today hadn't been a complete waste. If I can master this, I'll be king of the apocalypse, he thought, getting lost in grand fantasies of ruling over a frozen wasteland. But reality hit him like a snowball to the face. Food alone wouldn't be enough. He was defenseless out here. Panic set in as he realized he needed a weapon like yesterday. He quickly tidied up, shoving his weird science project back in the fridge, and headed out. It's happening, Han thought, his mind racing as he walked down the street. The forecast said temperatures would drop to 45 below within the week, and our boy needed a gun. But buying one wasn't exactly legal, and Han wasn't exactly rolling with the underworld crowd. Just when things seemed hopeless, he overheard some guy bragging about his connections in the construction world, with millions riding on every project. Han spotted the man who was talking to someone else and coming his way. The guy was going on about how he knew Lao Wang from the Shigong Lida group, practically his big brother or so he claimed. Han squinted at the guy, recognizing him as someone he'd seen around before. The man offered him a cigarette, proudly declaring that it was a gift from his big brother. Han couldn't help but notice the man's over-the-top fashion sense. Around here, they called him Homeless Joe. Li Zi, affectionately known as Brother Li around town, is a jack-of-all-trades with a knack for contracting projects and a reputation for knowing everyone. One day, a man offers him a cigarette, but Brother Li declines, sticking with his trusty Huazi brand because other smokes make him cough like he's got a pet parrot stuck in his throat. The man, curious, asks what he's up to. Li Zi, as casual as a cat napping in the sun, says he's working on a project for his big brother who's promised him a sauna visit. Despite not having a real job, Li Zi always looks busy, claiming on the phone to his big brother that he just sealed a $20 million deal and now has another $10 million one lined up. Our boy Han Feng's, watching from the sidelines, thinks, hey, this guy might have the connections I need. So he approaches Li Zi with a hearty, Brother Li, and mentions it's been ages since they last met. Li Zi looks at him like he's trying to remember if he's met a ghost or a long-lost cousin. Han Feng's chuckles, reintroduces himself, and tries to jog Li Zi's memory. Li Zi, who's been busier than a one-armed wallpaper hanger, apologizes for his forgetfulness and asks how he can help. Han Feng's leans in and whispers his request. Li Zi's eyes widen. A weapon! He's taken aback and asks why in the world Han Feng's needs one. Han Feng spins a yarn about an old man who spat on him while he was biking to work. After a confrontation and a scuffle, the man and his goons gave Han Feng's a rough time. Now Han Feng's feels humiliated and wants a weapon for self-defense. Li Zi, looking more concerned than a cat stuck in a bathtub. Says he has connections but isn't into anything shady. Han Feng's reassures him it's just for personal safety, not a criminal enterprise. Li Zi agrees to help, saying he'll call his big brother. He adds with a grin that if his Panamera wasn't in the shop, he'd drive Han Feng's himself. Han Feng's reassures him he's got his own ride, so off they go. As they drive, Li Zi admires Han Feng's SUV like a kid in a candy store and asks about the cost. Han Feng's casually mentions around 700,000, and Li Zi nods approvingly, saying it's a good deal. He then snaps a selfie and tells Han Feng's to turn left at the next intersection. The caption? Still figuring out this new SUV. It's a wild ride. At a bonfire, a group of guys are complaining about the weather, which has gone from summer to winter faster than a bad haircut grows back. One of them notices Han Feng's and Li Zi and asks what's up. Li Zi casually mentions they're there to see Boss Lu about some business. Someone comments on the new SUV, and Li Zi casually drops the price of 700,000 like he's talking about his lunch order. Han Feng's thinks, wow, this guy's got guts. One man, clearly in a mood, calls Li Zi Big Mouth, and asks why they're there so late. Li Zi offers him a cigarette, but the guy's too busy for that. Li Zi points to Han Feng's and explains he's looking to buy a gun. Boss Lu, looking like someone just told him he's out of coffee, is surprised and says he expected something more exciting. He calls over Changzi, who throws a gun on the table and quotes a price of 6,000. Han Feng's, aiming for something a bit fancier, mentions he wants a gun with a scope. Boss Lu, clearly annoyed, goes off like a firecracker, saying they're not at a mall where you can pick and choose. It's only this short one, take it or leave it. Li Zi tries to calm things down and spins a ludicrous story about Han Feng's wife and 3 kids that aren't his. Boss Lu, now livid and cursing up a storm, calls it disgusting. Han Feng's, feeling awkward and relieved, is glad when Boss Lu finally agrees to arrange the sniper rifle, though it might take a few days. He thanks him, and Boss Lu orders Changzi to arrange a semi-auto and load him up with ammo, even offering the gun as a gift. Han Feng's, pretending to be an expert, warns about supply limits due to the weird weather and advises to stock up. Boss Lu nods, understanding the urgency. Li Zi says it's time to go, and Boss Lu, visibly annoyed, tells them to beat it. As they leave, Li Zi is pumped, saying how smoothly everything went and how his big brother could probably grant any wish today. Han Feng's, feeling grateful, says he'll grab some cigarettes on the way out. Li Zi laughs and says don't be ridiculous. He's just helping out because he likes to. But if Han Feng's insists, he should get him some Huazi cigarettes because other brands make him cough. He suggests 7 or 8 cartons should be enough. Once Han Feng's gets paid, Li Zi promises a sauna trip to celebrate. Han Feng's, tuning out the chatter, mentally checks off his survival supplies and weapons, preparing for what he believes will be the early days of an apocalypse. He's determined to master his survival skills, especially food. Lost in thought, he slips on the snow. Li Zi rushes over, looking as concerned as a mom on a field trip, and asks if he's okay. Han Feng's winces in pain, clutching his leg, and hands over his car keys, asking for a hospital trip. Li Zi, flustered and admitting he doesn't have a driver's license, suggests they just walk it off. Han Feng's, still in pain, insists on a taxi and promises to cover the fare. In the office, a woman tells Jiyeon to see her later and reminds her to handle the night shift. Jiyeon wishes her to be careful in the snowy weather. Looking out the window, Jiyeon notices the snow piling up like a bad haircut. A phone beeps, and a voice asks the head nurse to come to the hall since they're short-staffed. Jiyeon quickly responds, saying she'll be there right away. Our boy Han Feng sits in the doctor's office, staring at the X-ray like it's a puzzle he's determined to solve. The doctor breaks the news. Yep, a stable fracture in his right tibia. He'll set the bone and keep Han Feng's under observation for an hour before he can get his meds. Han Feng sighs, thinking, of course, this had to happen right before the apocalypse hits. Great timing, universe. As Han Feng settles into the bustling waiting area, Li Zi swings by to say he's off to handle some deals. He tells Han Feng's to call if he needs anything. Han Feng's nods, then looks around at the chaotic hospital scene. The place is packed. Victims of accidents from the surprise blizzard and plummeting temperatures. Emergency beds line the hallways like an uncomfortable game of musical chairs. Han Feng's wonders how long it'll be before he gets his meds. His gaze lands on Jiyeon, the head nurse, who's busy attending to a patient. A nurse asks her to check bed 5's wounds. Jiyeon, looking calm and efficient, checks the patient's vital signs and gives instructions to administer another dose of glucose and epinephrine if needed. Han Feng's watches, a hint of blush on his face, thinking, wow, she's amazing young, skilled, kind, and really pretty. But man, she's way too clueless about the creep sitting next to me. Speaking of creeps, a man next to Han Feng's calls out to Jiyeon. With a smile that could win an award, Jiyeon apologizes and says they're short-staffed, asking if she can come back later. The man, pretending to be in pain, secretly starts filming with his phone, ready to slide it between her legs for some unsavory pics. He asks her to check his back, pulling her closer and placing his hands on her waist. Jiyeon, clearly uncomfortable but smiling, says she's ticklish and suggests waiting for the resident physician. The man grabs her hips, pushing his luck. Suddenly, Han Feng's, using his crutch like a pro, smacks the man, sending him crashing to the ground. Han Feng's apologizes, saying it's his first time using a crutch. He then picks up the man's phone, which the guy yells not to touch. Han Feng's, seeing what's on the phone, realizes this guy is filming up Jiyeon's skirt. He shows the man the incriminating photos and threatens to call security, warning him that his face might end up all over the internet. The man, gritting his teeth, scrambles away. Jiyeon, looking puzzled, comments that the man's back pain seemed to disappear pretty fast. Han Feng's is dumbfounded, thinking, wow, people really can be this clueless. He shows Jiyeon the photos and explains what happened. Jiyeon is shocked, saying she didn't notice. Han Feng's hands over the phone, telling her to decide whether to wipe it or call the cops. He also advises her to be more vigilant. She thanks him, her smile returning, and mentions she noticed his injured ankle earlier. Han Feng's winces in pain. Jiyeon bandages his ankle and reassures him that it's all done and should feel better. Han Feng's thanks her, noting it doesn't hurt at all now. Jiyeon thanks him for his help and vows to deal with bad guys more firmly in the future. Han Feng's agrees and advises her to stay alert. A voice calls for Jiyeon, and she tells Han Feng's to come back in a week to get his ankle checked. He waves and agrees, feeling like he might not see her again, and heads out. The next day, a reporter interrupts a program with urgent news. Within 24 hours, every region in the country will experience heavy snow and a sharp drop in temperatures. Reports from Egypt, Dubai, and the Amazon basin show temperatures plummeting worldwide. Experts from 46 countries are rushing to the UN to discuss this weather anomaly. They assure the public that this cold snap won't last long and urge everyone to follow local disaster warnings and avoid panic buying. Han Feng's, sipping wine and shaking his head, thinks, sure, they're just feeding us fluff to keep us calm. If I hadn't already been through this once, I might buy their story. But this time, I'm ready. He's stocked up on supplies, reinforced his house, and got the heating system sorted. Feeling confident, he takes another sip of wine. A notification dings, pulling him out of his wine-soaked reverie. He checks a group chat with messages from residents about the snow and weather. Among the chatter, a mysterious message catches his eye, warning that this snowstorm isn't just a freak of nature, but the beginning of an Ice Age apocalypse. Han Feng's raises an eyebrow, intrigued and wondering who this person is and how they know about the impending doom. The snowstorm had the Happy Housing Complex residents group chat blowing up like a microwave popcorn bag. Our boy Han Feng's was chilling, literally and figuratively, watching the drama unfold. It all started when one frustrated resident tagged the property management, practically shouting through their keyboard. The management team, probably hiding under their blankets, finally responded with an apology, explaining that this snowstorm was out of their league. Apparently, managing a blizzard wasn't part of their job description. Go figure. Cue the sarcasm from another resident, who questioned why they were paying these guys at all, followed by someone else demanding a refund. At this point, the group chat was like a snowstorm of its own. Wild, unpredictable, and piling up complaints faster than the snow outside. But then, just when it seemed like the chat was about to reach peak meltdown, a new voice entered the fray. Hey everyone, I'm Jiang Shueo from Unit June 1st, 1204. Why don't we all pitch in and clear the snow ourselves? We could have been done by now instead of arguing. The guy was talking sense, which was almost suspicious in a group chat like this. Jiang reminded them that the property management team was only human, just like the rest of them, and that there wasn't much they could do against Mother Nature's frosty wrath. Someone, not quite buying it, asked if Jiang was part of the management team. But Jiang was quick to clarify that he was just being realistic. Pushing the management into a corner wasn't going to help. Another resident, practically dripping with sarcasm, asked, "So what do we do now?" Jiang, still cool as a cucumber in a snowstorm, explained that driving to the supermarket wasn't happening. Even if they cleared the neighborhood roads, the ones outside were a different story. He suggested walking to the store and even offered to help clear the footpaths if others were willing to join in. Han Feng's, our hero, sat back and watched the drama unfold. He remembered Jiang Shueyo from his previous life, a lively guy, that one. Another resident wondered aloud if this situation was really that complicated. They suggested that those who wanted to go out should clear the roads while everyone else stayed quiet. Someone else agreed, saying they'd help because they had a business deal worth millions riding on it. Han Feng's chuckled. This person's tone reminded him of someone he knew, but he couldn't quite place it. More residents started volunteering, including a woman who admitted she wasn't strong but was willing to help. Even Hyona, despite battling the flu, said she'd join in, inspired by Jiang's example. Our boy Han Feng's was a little surprised she was jumping in, considering she usually played the helpless damsel role pretty well. But then, one of the guys told her to stay home and rest, assuring her that the men would handle the snow clearing. Hyona thanked them, saying she'd rely on them. Han Feng's shook his head, classic Hyona, playing her part perfectly. He closed the group chat, deciding he'd had enough of the drama for one day. His phone buzzed with notifications, and surprise, more messages from Hyona. She was asking what he'd been up to and reminding him that she was still waiting for him to get in touch. Another message told him to buy groceries when he visited the supermarket, and to get extra because she was still waiting. Scrolling through the messages, Han Feng's couldn't help but laugh when he saw a photo she'd sent. Despite the freezing weather, she was dressed to impress, or maybe just to mess with him. Our guy smirked, thinking about how much effort she was putting into getting him to run errands. He started crafting a clever reply, enjoying the little game she was playing. Meanwhile, somewhere across town, Hyona kicked her phone away in frustration, muttering, "Jerk," under her breath and vowing to make him pay for his nonchalant attitude. As for Han Feng's, the third day of snow was more of the same. The temperature had dropped to a bone-chilling -20 degrees, but central heating and the internet were still holding strong, making life somewhat bearable. Our boy was lounging on his couch, scrolling through videos to pass the time. Boredom was setting in fast, and the loneliness wasn't far behind. He glanced at his leg, still healing at a snail's pace. A broken bone needs months to recover, so he was stuck with his video marathons and the endless group chat drama for a while. As he scrolled, a news headline caught his eye. Is there really someone who possesses the power of self-recovery? The report talked about a guy who, after jumping from the 15th floor, showed signs of remarkable healing. The broadcast questioned whether this was real or fake and promised more details next week. Our hero felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he should have considered this before. He tried channeling green light into his hand and touching his leg, hoping for some miracle healing. But nothing. He tried again, same result. With a sigh, he lay back, realizing he might have overestimated his mysterious green light powers. Oh well, worth a shot. Yawning, he drifted back to sleep, only to find himself in a dream where he was riding a sheep. Yes, a sheep. And what does our boy announce with a grin? It's time for a walk. As if this was the most normal thing in the world. As our boy Han Feng's rides his trusty sheep, a whole herd follows close behind like they're part of some bizarre parade. But then, out of nowhere, the sheep pulls a fast one, jolting him off and sending him crashing to the ground. As he lies there, wincing and cursing his sheep riding skills, one of the sheep decides to play doctor and starts licking his twisted ankle. Gross. Han Feng's shudders, more from the slimy tongue than the pain, and pushes the sheep away. But this woolly wannabe medic isn't taking no for an answer. It wraps its tongue around his leg and gives him a shove that would make any schoolyard bully proud. Han Feng's wakes up, heart pounding, half expecting to find a sheep still gnawing on his leg. But no, just the strange, messy remnants of a dream he'd rather forget. As he catches his breath, he glances down at his foot. And what do you know? It's glowing with a weird, eerie green light. Curious and maybe a little freaked out, he removes the bandage and just like magic, the pain is gone. Poof. He's not exactly sure what's going on. But if this green light is handing out free healing, he's here for it. Deciding to play scientist, our guy grabs a knife. His hand trembles as he makes a tiny cut on his finger. Don't try this at home, folks. Blood trickles out, but almost immediately, that same green glow kicks in. Han Feng stares, amazed as the cut starts to heal right before his eyes. Who needs doctors when you've got whatever this is? Meanwhile, outside, the residents are doing their best impressions of human snowplows. Shovels scrape against the ground in a rhythm that could almost be musical if it weren't so backbreaking. 1, 2, 3. They chant. Jiang Shueo, our resident voice of reason, wipes his hands and thanks everyone for their hard work. He even apologizes to Uncle Lu for the inconvenience the snowstorm has caused, though Uncle Lu just laughs it off. He insists the credit belongs to the Jin brothers. Jin Qinwen and Jin Qinwu, basking in the praise like they've just won gold medals in snow shoveling, are quickly distracted when they spot a woman slipping on the icy ground. Like true knights in puffy jackets, they rush over to help, warning her to watch her step. The lady, Jin Jian, reassures them that she's fine and thanks them for their concern. One of the Jin brothers, ever the gentleman, suggests they finish clearing the path, telling her to holler if she needs anything. Jin Jian waves them off, insisting she's got it under control. Strong, independent woman alert. Back to the snow removal operation, Jiang Shueo and Uncle Ji start discussing the storm's intensity and the urgent need for supplies. Uncle Ji, taking a long drag from his cigarette, mentions something that's been bugging him. Curious as ever, Jiang Shueo presses for details. Uncle Ji explains that he noticed a neighbor hauling supplies with a small truck. A bit excessive, unless they're preparing for the snowstorm of the century. Jiang Shueo speculates that it could be someone moving in or doing renovations, but Uncle Ji isn't buying it. He points out the gas tanks and fireplace the neighbor's packing, hinting that this is more about surviving a harsh winter than redecorating. The Jin brothers interrupt with good news. The main path is finally clear. Uncle Ji thanks them just as Wu Kuan-yu shows up, eager to join the conversation. But before he can say anything, a snowball smacks him in the head, courtesy of Lu Yen. She's not having any of his slacking off and tells him to get back to work. Wu Kuan-yu, of course, tries to play it off, claiming he did all the hard labor while Lu Yen just stood around. But Lu Yen isn't letting him off that easy. She blocks his finger pointing like a pro and gives him a good scolding. Jiang Shueo steps in to break up the bickering, instructing everyone to prepare for a trip to the supermarket. They need to stock up before the snow gets even worse. Jin Jian agrees, and one of the Jin brothers grumbles about the long shopping list. The other decides to give their mom a heads up, figuring they might need extra supplies at home. Uncle Ji, ever the curious type, asks Jiang Shueo if he thinks there's more to the snowstorm than meets the eye. After a pause, Jiang Shueo dismisses the idea, saying it's just a storm and it'll pass. Even if it doesn't, having a neighbor with a stockpile of supplies could come in handy. Uncle Ji chuckles, appreciating the younger generation's practical wisdom. As the snowstorm shows no sign of letting up, Jiang Shueo gets everyone lined up and ready to head out, aiming to be back within 3 hours. The snow outside might be piling up, but the light inside Han Feng's apartment remains bright. Just as Han Feng's is about to drift off into another weird dream, a loud knock jerks him awake. He stumbles off the couch, groggy and confused, only to be greeted by Li Zi at the door. And guess what? Li Zi's packing heat, literally. He's holding a large sniper rifle, cool as a cucumber. With a grin, he announces that he's brought the item Han Feng's requested and reveals it's a semi-automatic. Our boy Han Feng's gives Li Zi a nod of thanks for the sniper. Li Zi shrugs it off, telling him, "No need to mention it, my guy. Brother Lu insisted we thank you properly. We got lucky with those supplies after all." Han Feng's chuckles, waving it off like it's no big deal. But then Li Zi lets out a sigh, the kind that tells you there's something heavy on his mind. Han Feng's, ever the curious one, asks, "What's eating you, man?" Li Zi spills the beans about the supermarket over in the East District. Turns out, after they cleared the snow, they checked the place out, only to find it completely emptied out, like someone had gone on the ultimate shopping spree overnight. Han Feng's eyes widen. Like, seriously? The whole supermarket? Cleaned out in one night? That's like something out of a bad dream, or worse, one of those survival horror movies. Li Zi, probably as weirded out as Han Feng's, decides to head back, throwing in a quick, "Dress warm, all right?" Han Feng's agrees, but as he shuts the door, his mind's racing. Who on earth could pull off something like that? Suddenly, he remembers all those wild stories from comics and novels. Superhumans with the power to store stuff in another dimension, like some kind of magical backpack. Could that actually be a thing? Clenching his fist, the boy feels a knot of unease tightening in his gut. He needs to figure out what's going on with his own strange powers. Sitting on the sofa, Deep in thought, Han Feng's tries to make sense of what he knows so far. His green glowy power seems to mess with food, changing its size or quantity, but the success rate is, well, pretty pathetic. Sure, he can make a soybean work 1 out of 10 times, but meat? Total disaster. As he watches that green light dance around his hand, he can't help but wonder why it's just not working. Suddenly, with a little pop, the soybean he was holding turns into a rock. Frustrated but stubborn, Han Feng's tightens his grip, determined to crack this mystery wide open. It's 10:45 p.m., and our boy's sitting there with a branch in his hand, reflecting on how far he's come, or how far he still has to go. The weight of exhaustion settles over him, and he realizes that the green light's energy isn't something he can just tap into endlessly. Every type of food seems to have its own energy value, and when he mismatches it, boom, instant failure. Then it hits him like a memory from an old online dancing game he used to play. The energy inputs need to be precise and steady, just like hitting the right directional keys in that game. Focusing hard, he manages to perfect the branch. It's a small win, but it gives him the boost he needs. Next on the menu? Meat. But he knows that screwing this one up could turn it into some nasty, foul-smelling black goo that no one in their right mind would want to taste. With a deep breath and renewed determination, Han Feng starts tweaking the energy values, but it's one failure after another. Frustration bubbles up, and he can't help but wonder why this is so ridiculously hard. After what feels like ages, surrounded by the remnants of his culinary failures, Han Feng silently works on a piece of meat. He carefully blends the red and green lights, and then, bam, a breakthrough. He feels a shift, and before he knows it, the meat begins to enlarge. Exhausted but pumped, he collapses onto the floor. Finally, he's cracked the code. The next morning, the news isn't exactly cheerful. It's July 17th, and the third day of an insane snowstorm that's got the whole country in a chokehold. The broadcast is somber, warning that this is the worst storm in a century. The government's doing what it can, but traffic, electricity, and networks are all taking a hit. Resources are being distributed, and folks are urged to stay indoors unless it's absolutely necessary. As the news sinks in, Han Feng's is hit with a wave of déjà vu. This feels eerily similar to the collapse he lived through in his past life. Just then, his phone buzzes with a group message, and he sees the residents are already arguing about what the news means. Some are clinging to hope, waiting for official help, while others are in full panic mode, thinking it's every man for himself. Uncle Lou chimes in, casting doubt on the news. If things were really under control, he argues, wouldn't help have arrived by now. He drops a bombshell, saying he's heard from friends that armored vehicles, tanks, and heavy weaponry are heading towards City A. His conclusion, ominous as it gets, war might be on the horizon. A concerned voice cuts through the chatter, asking if the rumors are true and if they're really in deep trouble. Han Feng's ears perk up. This sounds all too familiar, like the same crisis he remembers from his past life. Jiang Shueyo, always the quick thinker, chimes in. If Uncle Lou's grim prediction is on point, he says, they've got to act fast. The neighborhood's already feeling the squeeze, with some folks running low on food. Without knowing when government aid will show up, Jiang suggests they start organizing help themselves. He proposes that those with extra food share with those in need, leading by example as he offers up half of his own supplies and pledges to help anyone who comes to him. Wu Kuanyu nods in agreement, stressing that community support is crucial. No one should go hungry in this kind of weather, he says, before turning to Li Hyona, asking if she's willing to pitch in. Li Hyona, clearly irritated, wonders why he's putting her on the spot, probably still salty from when she turned him down. She apologizes, saying she barely has enough food for herself, and a few others back her up, noting that she's just scraping by like the rest of them. Wu Kuanyu, though clearly disappointed, doesn't back down. He emphasizes that true unity means everyone should contribute. If they can't get everyone on board, he warns he won't donate either. After some back and forth, the crowd eventually agrees to pitch in. Several people step forward, offering clothes and medicine, showing that they're ready to help. Jiang Shueyo then proposes forming an emergency committee to manage the donations, calling it the Interim Owners Committee. Han Feng's, recalling similar setups from his past life, narrows his eyes. This could easily turn into a way for some to exploit the resources of others. By July 19th, the 5th day of the apocalypse, the temperature has plummeted to a bone-chilling -40 degrees. The central heating system, overwhelmed by the extreme cold, is as good as useless. While everyone else scrambles to stay warm, our boy Han Feng's is chilling, literally and figuratively. He's lounging with snacks spread out in front of him, casually watching zombies on TV. Just then, his phone rings. The caller confirms his identity and informs him that they'll start clearing the roads in 20 minutes. After that, Han Feng's is supposed to head down to the basement car park to sign in. But Han Feng's, skeptical of the whole thing, doubts they can even clear the roads with all this heavy snow. Down in the lobby on the first floor, Han Feng's finds himself surrounded by a crowd of anxious faces. As he surveys the scene, he makes a mental note to steer clear of unnecessary conflicts with the neighbors and to keep his abilities under wraps. The snowstorm outside has already buried their entrance, and the door is practically useless now. Someone in the crowd points out the path they'd cleared just the day before, now buried under a fresh mountain of snow. Another person exclaims they've never seen snow pile up this high in their entire life. A suggestion floats through the air. Maybe they should try pushing the door open. Just then, someone spots Han Feng's and calls out to him, referring to him as the black-haired brother, asking for his help. Though reluctant, Han Feng's agrees. On the count of 3, they all push against the door. It creaks open just enough to let in a blast of frigid wind, causing everyone to flinch. Someone comments on how extreme the snowstorm is, noting that the cold is so harsh it's hard to even keep their eyes open. Han Feng's feels the sting of the bitter cold and can't help but worry that if they step outside, they might get frostbite, or worse. Another person predicts frostbite if they try to clear the snow, while someone else adds that they can't handle this much snow on their own. One more voice chimes in, saying only a fool would go out in this weather. Amidst the debate, Han Feng's hears Li Zi's voice, urging everyone to be brave and take action. Han Feng's warns him not to be reckless, reminding him that this isn't some game. Someone in the crowd agrees with Han Feng's, suggesting they wait for the snow to stop. But Li Zi, in his typical gung-ho fashion, rushes outside, only to start shouting for help moments later. They quickly pull him back inside and shut the door. Li Zi coughs, and Han Feng's, concerned, asks if he's all right. Then, Han Feng suggests they head to the car park to find the person in charge and sign in, noting that the snowstorm is too severe to handle with just manpower. In the car park, Jiang Shueo takes charge, declaring that the snow is too heavy right now and suggesting they wait for it to lighten up before trying to clear it. He also announces that the basement parking lot will be used as a donation and collection point. Han Feng's watches him closely, realizing that this guy is the one leading the so-called scam committee. Jiang Shueo thanks everyone for their support and for the generous donations that will help those in need. A man in the crowd speaks up, saying that everyone's facing tough times, so they should all help each other out. Another man adds that as long as they stay united, they'll get through this crisis. But Han Feng's, listening to all this talk, thinks to himself that this disaster might last a lot longer than they're expecting, and they might just end up regretting their generosity. Li Zi turns to Han Feng's and says he's heading back upstairs. Han Feng's nods, and as he glances around, he spots Jin Jian nearby. She bumps into him, and he catches her, asking if she's okay. Jin Jian thanks him, recognizing him, and asks if his leg has healed. Our boy Han Feng's, ever so nervous, comes up with a quick excuse. He tells Jin Jian that he's always had a bit of a superhero healing factor since he was young. Common injuries just don't stand a chance against him. Jin Jian, wide-eyed, tells him it's amazing, probably picturing him as some kind of low-key X-Man. Wanting to flex a little, Han Feng's offers to carry the heavy boxes she's lugging around. It's my way of saying thanks for helping with my bandage, he claims, trying to be all chivalrous. Jin Jian hesitates, thinking, this guy doesn't know what he's in for. But she lets him take over anyway. As Han Feng's grabs the boxes and feels the weight, he starts wondering what she's been packing. Dumbbells or something. When he asks, Jin Jian explains that the boxes are full of medical supplies she's donating. She then, with a teasing smile, asks if the boxes are too heavy for him and why he doesn't just let her carry them. Our guy, blushing a bit, because, let's be real, he's trying to impress her, insists he's totally fine and that the weight is nothing. In his mind, though, he's probably regretting not hitting the gym more often. As they walk, Jin Jian tells him not to overdo it and casually mentions that she's stronger than most guys. Now Han Feng's, curious as a cat, asks if she's always been that way. Jin Jian hints that there's a bit more to the story, but she doesn't spill the tea just yet. Amidst all the heavy lifting, Jin Jian realizes she doesn't even know our hero's name. When she asks, Han Feng's introduces himself and they have that classic, nice to meet you moment, like they're in some kind of rom-com. Jin Jian then inquires about his job. RMC, trying to keep it cool, just says he's unemployed. Jin Jian's surprise is written all over her face, but before she can grill him about it, someone bumps into her, causing her to stumble right into Han Feng's. Now, this could be straight out of a cliché. He ends up blushing because, well, soft collision and all. Jin Jian quickly apologizes, and Han Feng's, trying to keep his cool, brushes it off like it's no big deal. Enter Hyona, who pops up right on cue, greeting Han Feng's with a playful, "Why haven't you let me know you were out?" She hooks her arm around his, giving Jin Jian the side eye and asking if she's a friend of his. Jin Jian, sensing the vibe, decides to make a graceful exit. She thanks Han Feng's for the help, grabs her boxes, and heads out, leaving Han Feng's to deal with Hyona. Han Feng's, still in what just happened mode, asks Hyona why she's there. She explains that she came to pick up supplies and got worried when he didn't call her. Han Feng's, thinking on his feet, says he was just about to send her a message. Hyona, not buying it for a second, accuses him of lying and points out how he was just chit-chatting away with Jin Jian. Switching gears, she asks if he has any extra food at home since she's running low. Our boy, with a smirk that could rival any trickster, agrees to share some but reminds her that she didn't respond to his earlier message. Then, pulling her a little closer, he hits her with, "How about coming over to my place and keeping me company for a few days?" Classic move, right? Hyona, momentarily at a loss for words, says she didn't get his earlier message and suggests that if he wants to chat, he can just hit her up online. Han Feng's, sensing her reluctance, takes a step back, saying he'll take the hint and leave. But before he can make a dramatic exit, Hyona grabs his coat and asks him to wait. She tells him she feels he's changed recently and that she's serious about her feelings. With a bit of drama and maybe a tear or two, she asks for more time, not wanting people to think she's only with him for his money. Our boy, seeing right through the act, thanks to the school of hard knocks, realizes she's playing the long game. He decides to let things play out like they did in his past life. With a grin, he tells her he was just teasing and promises to deliver the food supplies the next day. Hyona, clearly relieved, thanks him and suggests they keep in touch online. Han Feng's waves her off with a friendly reminder to stay healthy and not catch a cold. As they part ways, both of them are grinning behind each other's backs, each thinking they've got the upper hand. Later, Han Feng's is chilling with a warm meal, savoring every bite, when his phone buzzes with notifications from Hyona asking about the food. As he chews on a piece of meat, he can't help but think, this weather might be terrible, but man, it makes this meal taste even better. Our boy Han Feng's, ever the mad scientist, reviews the results of his recent culinary experiments like he's some sort of post-apocalyptic Gordon Ramsay. He confirms two things. First, you can't stretch meat like you do soybeans, no infinite steak buffet here. Second, much like soybeans, meat can be reproduced indefinitely. He recalls his genius method. For every beanstalk that sprouted, he kept half for growing more beans and the other half for snacking. The same idea worked for steak. Under the magic of two types of light, a small piece of steak mixed with some soybeans could grow into a full-blown steak. After countless tests, Han Feng's feels pretty confident that food shortages won't be on his list of worries anytime soon. Fast forward to the morning of August 2nd, and things are getting chilly, like really chilly. A news reporter on TV is talking about some island in the Maldives, Bodu Hithi or something, where the temperatures plummeted to a bone-chilling -42 degrees. That's right, the equator's decided to cosplay as the North Pole. The island is practically buried under ice and snow, and the ocean's freezing up faster than a popsicle in winter. The ice has already thickened to 55 centimeters, and other places near the equator are seeing similar freaky conditions. Han Feng's, our ever-skeptical MC, figures the media's sugarcoating things. It's probably even worse out there. Suddenly, boom. Another explosion, the seventh one in recent days. Han Feng sneaks a peek through the curtains, spotting the blast and military helicopters hovering around like they're in an action movie. Things are clearly getting dicey outside, and he knows the other residents are holed up in the basement parking lot, swapping supplies and food like it's a survival market. Of course, some folks are taking advantage of the chaos, stirring up conflicts over what's left. Then, a new message pops up in the group chat, telling folks who are struggling to head down to the basement for free resources. Han Feng's, not exactly thrilled, bundles up and heads into the icy basement, sneezing along the way. He grumbles to himself that if it weren't for the intel, he wouldn't be down here. He remembers that before his rebirth, there was a rebellion in this neighborhood, and it looks like history might be repeating itself. When he gets to the basement, Han Feng's notices that the resources are actually being handed out. No scams this time. He's surprised but also curious about what's really going on. His attention shifts to a guy who's throwing a fit, demanding to know why, after donating several big boxes of supplies, he's only getting a measly amount of food in return. Jiang Shueo, trying to play peacemaker, explains that everyone's getting an equal share, but the guy's not having it. He wants his donated resources back, like now. Jiang Shueo apologizes, saying the resources can't be returned due to the ongoing disaster, and assures him that he'll be compensated generously once this mess is over. The guy, frustrated and probably hungry, asks how long this snowstorm is going to last and insists on getting his stuff back. The crowd isn't impressed. They start calling him out, saying he's shameless and should just take what he's given. They point out that even the committee members are struggling. Han Feng's, watching the whole drama unfold, thinks that expecting a refund on resources during a crisis is pretty unrealistic. The whole situation reeks of desperation, and trying to claim the moral high ground now is especially shameless. Just then, Han Feng's hears someone nearby grumbling about the shamelessness of it all. He turns to see Li Zi, who greets him with a weak laugh and admits he's feeling pretty overwhelmed. Han Feng's notices that his friend looks hungry, and Li Zi confesses that living on water alone isn't cutting it. He reveals that he donated most of his supplies to help others, leaving himself with almost nothing as the snowstorm drags on. He regrets not holding on to more and complains about the tiny portions they're getting from the committee. Seeing an opportunity, Han Feng's leans in and quietly whispers a little favor to Li Zi. Suddenly, Li Zi shouts, "For this small thing, Han Feng's is willing to give me 4 packs of instant noodles and 2 sausages." He's practically tearing up in gratitude, vowing never to forget Han Feng's kindness. Han Feng's, playing it cool, tells him to come by his place later to pick up the food. Li Zi, practically glowing with appreciation, agrees and heads off to gather his own meager supplies. As Han Feng's reflects on the situation, he feels pretty satisfied. A small exchange of food has solved his problem, and now he won't have to personally hunt for information in the future. Sure, he feels a little guilty about his friend, but the thought of relaxing at home with a full belly and some games to play outweighs his concerns. Just as he's about to relish in his little victory, his moment of peace is shattered when Hyona storms over, calling his name, and slaps him across the face, expressing her deep disappointment. Looks like our boy's problems aren't over just yet.
To be continued. If you want to watch the next part, then like and subscribe and let me know in the comment of what recap you want to watch next.